monsters. Welcome to our podcast. It's always a good time when us weirdos have a place to gather virtually and discuss the subject that unites us, murder. That's why we started this true crime cult. But not to worry, you've landed in the cult with all of the camaraderie and none of the UFO death stuff. If you're just joining us for the first time today, allow us to introduce ourselves. I'm Angelina, your favorite crime-solving pixie, and I'm here with the real housewife of true crime, Aurora. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Great.
Good. Well, thanks for joining us, true crime friends. The MMN commune is all-encompassing, which means you can join us on your favorite platform as we work on saturating the internet with all the best true crime content. If you want to become an official cult member, get a little title, some murder merch, and even sponsor one of our adorable baby goats, you're in luck because it's so easy to join. Join us on patreon.com/murdernews and pledge any amount you like to show your support. Just by signing up, you will also unlock access to our exclusive Patreon-only video episodes and early bird tickets to our live virtual events. Plus, as an early adapter, you will receive the best perks like a shout out on our show and personalized content catered towards your interests.
Please go do it now. Press pause on this episode, head over to Patreon immediately before you forget. I know I can be pretty scatterbrained, so maybe we have that in common. Let's start off with a look at the true crime stories that made headlines this week.
Human remains were found in the desert in Yucca Valley on Sunday near the location where missing person Lauren Cho was last found alive. 30-year-old Lauren has been missing since June 28th. She was staying in an Airbnb with a friend and her ex-boyfriend at the time of her disappearance. Her ex-boyfriend reported her missing at 5 p.m. that night. He said they had a fight and she walked away on her own without a cell phone, keys, or any belongings.
Sounds unlikely.
Yeah, for sure. And we're hoping there's going to be an update to this case before this episode airs on Friday. We are recording a couple days in advance, so we apologize if this is slightly out of date. We will be definitely keeping an eye on whether or not they have found her on our social media. So take a peek there if you haven't gotten an update yet.
Also in the news, last week, 29-year-old Akeelia Ware was found fatally shot in her car on the side of a Georgia highway. Akeelia was 33 weeks pregnant, and her unborn baby did not survive. She had been reportedly run off the road while being shot at and left in her car to die. Police have now named Akeelia's boyfriend, 30-year-old Alonzo Dargan, as her suspected killer. Alonzo was an active duty soldier at Fort Bragg. He was the father of the unborn baby. He's been charged with murder, feticide, and the possession of a firearm. Now, before we get into our story, we just want to say that while our tone is light in the intro, we do take the topics we're discussing very seriously. We are best buds and we love chatting together every week and turning it into a podcast. We want to share that passion with you and to create a vibe where all of you feel like our best buds too. We joke about us friends forming a cult or commune, but that's not to diminish the severity of actual cult activity, which we do occasionally talk about in our weekly stories. We feel it's important to open up and talk about even the darkest aspects of humanity and the downright scary things that come up in the news. But we want to make it clear that our intention is never to sensationalize, and we always try to deliver these stories with respect to all parties involved or affected by the crimes we discuss.
We always post our sources in the episode description, so you can do some digging on your own if a story we present piques your interest. But you should know that if you ever feel we get it wrong, either in our tone or in the details of the case, we want to hear about it. We are more than happy to make a correction or give an update on a case we've discussed in previous episodes. So feel free to reach out to us at murdernews@gmail.com. Some specific trigger warnings for this episode include a graphic description of violence. So if that subject is particularly sensitive for you, feel free to skip this one and listen to one of our other episodes instead. We're now on episode 35, so with 34 other episodes under our belts, there is surely something for everyone. We're going to take a little break from our usual true crime history cases to talk about a cold case that really needs your help. 38-year-old Peter Schnellhardt was found brutally murdered at his job in Williams Lake, British Columbia on July 4th, 2006. This is another case that got very little media coverage at the time and has left Peter's sister, Petra, fighting, clawing, and grasping for answers. One of the most frustrating parts about this case is that one of the men Petra believes killed her brother actually did go to trial. But that trial was seemingly a bit of a mess, with the prosecutor who seemed to be fighting for the accused, witnesses who came forward but weren't called to testify, and evidence being excluded. Much more on all of that later. The criminal justice system has let her and her family down, and 15 years after her brother was killed, she still wants answers. You know, we take a victim-first approach to true crime, so let's get to know Peter better and find out what he was like. We talked with Petra, his sister, about who Peter was and why she fights so hard for him.
My name is Petra Bunn, and I am Peter's sister, older sister by 10 years, 11 years, actually. And so when he was growing up, I helped my mom and my parents a lot, with, looking after them. And then I got to the age where I could babysit and, I would often, I had like two brothers, and I would put them in the stroller and wheel them around and, things like that. So when they were growing up, I wasn't as much part of their lives because I was older already, by 10 years. And so, but my two brothers, they were very, very close, and they hung out together all the time. And most of the pictures that I have are with the two of them together, because they like I said, they were a year apart in age. And so they were very close. And I was more, the caregiver in some ways, and the older sister. And so I guess now I've got that role as well, is to, kind of look into what happened to him. My parents, after he was murdered, they asked me to find out what happened to him. And so that's what I've been doing ever since. So it's going on 15 years.
Peter was born in New Brunswick in 1967, and he was the youngest of three kids. He was really close to his older brother, Gary, who was a year older than him. Petra remembers Peter as a good kid who just really liked animals.
When he was younger, we had a lot of rabbits. Like they really liked rabbits, raising rabbits and stuff like that. So there's a lot of pictures of the two of them with the rabbits, and they liked pets and animals and things like that. So that was kind of cute, how they were always caring about animals, I would say. And I don't know, he's just a good kid. He was never in trouble or anything like that as growing up.
His father, Gerhard, was a German immigrant who worked many jobs to take care of his family, such as a coal miner and a trucker. The family moved to Canmore, Alberta for Gerhard's work, and Peter really thrived there.
He was a skier. He loved to ski. We lived in Canmore, Alberta, which is right near Banff. And so my brothers would go to Banff and ski, and they had snowmobiles, and they would go up in the hills, and they had motorbikes, and they would go up in the hills, and they would just have lots and lots of fun and lots of friends and things like that. He when he got older, he, like my dad, was very handy himself. So he taught my two brothers a lot of things, like how to, mechanically, how to look after cars and taking engines apart and building things. And so he was very, very handy with stuff like that, and took an interest in it as he got older. My dad he's had many different careers, but The one that he had that my brother Peter took an interest in was my dad was a trucker, long haul. So Peter took an interest in that as well. And he worked in that job for many, many years. And he was able to even, fix the motors and stuff like that. It was quite good, but he never did actually go to school for that and learn it. He just knows, by experience and by being shown.
As a young adult, things were going really well for Peter. He followed his passion of working on cars and working as a trucker and was really thriving in Calgary. He even owned a house by the age of 31, which is something I can't even imagine as an elder millennial. But things started to break down for Peter when he entered a toxic relationship with a new partner.
He was doing very well. He had his own house and everything in Calgary, and he had a number of vehicles, and he had a great job, and he was trucking at the time, and had a great job, and he was in a previous relationship, and it fell apart after a number of years. And he took that very hard. And then he ended up meeting another woman. And after that, everything fell apart. Just everything fell apart. I don't know how to explain it, except that it was just one thing after another thing after another thing. And then he was pretty much broke and bankrupt, and then ended up leaving Calgary with this woman to go to British Columbia. And my parents were not happy about that. And I don't think that they liked her very much. And they felt that she was abusive to him and controlling. So he went to British Columbia, and my parents were upset with him, and he knew that. And so they didn't have actually much contact. We didn't know much about what was going on with him. He was being very isolated, I guess, in a lot of ways. And so we had really no idea what was going on with him, but we figured it wasn't good. We knew that he was employed when he was in British Columbia. He was logging. So again, that has to do with trucking. And so he was doing that, and he had sent some pictures and everything. And we thought, well, at least that's good. He got his license in British Columbia for that, because you have to redo your driver's license. And he had asked my parents for some money, and they offered it, of course, because they wanted him to work and stay working. But besides that, we didn't know a whole lot about what was, really going on. We knew that at one point, and this was actually very shortly before he was murdered, that he and this woman had split up, and that was his choice. So basically, this was about a day or two before he was murdered that we found that out. And also that he had gotten a new job, and that he was actually working fixing big concrete company, their trucks, the big, what do you call them, the cement mixers and things like that. So, he was actually fixing the engines. And so my parents thought that was really good, because that was, a passion of his, along with trucking and just trucks in general, And so they thought that was good. But he did say that there was some things going on, and that he would tell us later what they were. And then we never talked to him basically again after that.
Peter had fallen out of touch with his family, who he had previously been so close to, largely because the new woman he was dating was creating a barrier. This is really common in abusive relationships, and the abuser often tries to block friends and family from contacting their partner because they don't want them to have a way out. It's easier for them to control their partner if they don't have a support system. Petra had tracked down Peter using a private investigator. She sent him letters, letting him know that his dad was sick, and now was the time to put any bad feelings they had behind them. His new girlfriend intercepted those letters. His family knew he was in trouble and that this woman was involved in drugs and had contributed to Peter losing his job and his home. They were worried about his well-being and were desperate to get in touch with him.
Peter did break up with this woman about 4 months before his murder. He was getting things back on track, and he had a job repairing trucks at United Concrete in Williams Lake, British Columbia. He was getting ready to move into a new apartment. He had moved on, and he had started a relationship with a woman that he had previously dated when his ex-girlfriend decided she wanted to get back together. Peter was not interested, and unfortunately, it appears that, like so many other abusers, his ex-girlfriend decided if she couldn't have him, no one could. We want to proceed with caution in explaining what happened next because in situations of rape allegations, we believe victims and survivors. False rape allegations are incredibly rare, and even in a system of reporting and investigating rape allegations designed by men and thought to be inflated, it's estimated that only 4 to 9% of all reported rapes are false reports. It's really rare, and we believe the victims until there is staggering evidence that the allegation is false.
This is relevant because what we believe happened next is that Peter's ex-girlfriend started telling people that he had raped her 15-year-old daughter. Petra believes she told 2 rather dangerous men this specifically to manipulate them into either seriously hurting or murdering Peter. As we mentioned, we take rape allegations very seriously, but Petra had good reason to believe Peter's ex did make this up as revenge for Peter not wanting to get back together.
When the accused was arrested and charged, the RCMP told me that that the motive for it was that he had apparently molested his ex's daughter from a previous marriage. Okay, so this is not my brother. My brother had no children, and that she was there visiting with her mother for the summer, and basically, I said to them, I just didn't believe that. I just didn't think that my brother would ever do anything like that at all. And the RCMP were in touch with her as well. And she told them the same thing, that he did not touch her and that this was not true.
Based on what the RCMP discovered from interviewing her daughter, it does appear that this was a false allegation from the mother to get revenge against Peter. His ex-girlfriend then allegedly talked 2 men into attacking Peter. She knew he had just started a new job, and she knew he'd be working late fixing trucks. It's Petra's understanding that Peter would work late so trucks could be used during the day. The 3 then plotted the attack and brought what was likely a stolen gun to United Concrete and Gravel.
On July 3rd, 2006, Peter talked to his parents on the phone for the last time, just hours before his murder. Whatever was happening with his ex and her telling others that Peter had raped her daughter, Peter was seemingly unaware that anything was wrong.
I think that he was feeling positive about his life, that he had gotten away from her and the situation that she was in, and that he had gotten this new job, which he was really, really proud of. Like, he really loved that job. He was only in it for 3 weeks. And he thought, that his future looked good, that he was making the right steps. I think the only thing that worried him was all this other stuff that was going on around him. But I don't think that he thought he was in danger. I think that he thought that he was going to be okay.
Since Peter's murder has never been solved, we kind of have to piece together what likely happened after midnight in the early hours of July 4th. The police have never released any details about Peter's murder and shared very little information with Petra and her family. In the 15 years since his death, she has been tirelessly collecting witness testimonies and searching for evidence to paint a picture of what she believes happened. Because the police have only ever made one arrest in the case and have not named the other two people who were likely involved in his murder, we will not be using any of their names. You may have noticed we are simply referring to Peter's ex-girlfriend as just that. We will be referring to the other two men who were reportedly involved as the accused because he was actually tried for Peter's murder, and the other man as the second suspect.
We're not exactly sure what happened leading up to the murder, but Petra has reason to believe that the ex-girlfriend convinced the accused, the suspect, and perhaps a third man into going to Peter's work that night. The third man may have believed that they were going to just scare Peter and left the scene when he realized they intended to kill him. It's believed that they got there sometime after 12 a.m. on July 4th. We do want to give an extra content warning because we're about to play a clip from our interview with Petra where she goes into detail about how Peter was murdered. The details are graphic and disturbing, so if this is a trigger for you, feel free to fast forward ahead about 2.5 minutes.
It was a brutal murder. It was like way over the top. And he was shot 3 times in the head. With what they assume was a 22. They did a ballistics report, that RCMP did, and the bullets had fragmented quite a bit, but the coroner believed that it was a 22, as did the RCMP. So I imagine that's what it says in the ballistics report, although that never came to the trial. It was never produced at trial. The other thing was that he had been beaten, severely beaten, especially about the head and the face. And it was the Crown prosecutor, they called him Crown Counsel in British Columbia. It was the Crown prosecutor who told me that he had found out from the accused that he had used a rock to beat my brother's face and head with, and that it was a blow to just around the eye here that actually killed him, is why he died. This is what the coroner stated, at the trial. But this evidence about the rock and whatnot, that didn't come out in court. The coroner only knew that it was a sharp, hard object. What I understood is that he was shot first, and that it was like here through the jaw, and that it broke his jaw. And then the other two might have been after he was beaten. The other 2 shots, maybe after he was beaten. And the cutting of the throat, that was also the very last thing that was done. I think it was to make sure that he was dead. And then he was hauled into the ditch, basically, after that.
How the attack actually happened is still a bit of a mystery because between a confession by the accused, the witness, and the coroner's report, we're not exactly sure what the order of the attack was. We do know that he was shot 3 times, twice in the head and 1 in the hand. He was very badly beaten, and his throat was slit. It was a very aggressive attack, and Peter did fight back. Petra and her family were largely kept in the dark about the investigation, and in fact, they didn't even find out Peter had been murdered until 4 days later. His family had been calling him, not knowing why he wasn't answering. Once they did find out about the murder, the investigators were not exactly cooperative.
I would phone almost every day and they would say, well, we can't tell you anything. So that was frustrating, like being left out in the loop. And I had really no one to contact to find out, hey, what do you know about it? Except for one person, and that was the owner of the motorhome. I was given his phone number, and because apparently I was supposed to tell him what to do with my brother's stuff, and I did that, and I talked to him, and he told me that he was a good friend of my brother's and that he wished that he had been able to see him more often and do more things with him. But my brother's ex was very controlling and apparently didn't allow that. So I was trying to tell him, maybe just to keep everything in the box for us, that we would come out, and pick up everything. But then the RCMP, they basically told us that we were not next of kin and that we didn't have any right to any of his stuff. And we said, well, why are we not next of kin, considering that, he's split up from his ex and he didn't have a will. So that complicated matters as well. But they told us that we were not next of kin and that we really didn't have any right to know anything. So then I started kind of freaking out, thinking that, well, they were treating his ex as the next of kin and communicating with her, when at the same time, my parents and I were kind of discussing that we kind of thought that she was involved in this somehow, because of her behavior after the murder. Like, she never called us or anything. And you would think that even if they were split up and he got murdered by some other people, she knew us well enough and knew our phone number that she would contact us and say, I've got something to tell you about what happened to Peter, but she never did. And I never talked to her, nothing from her at all. And so that even made us more suspicious, that somehow she was involved, because otherwise she would have called. There's just no reason not to. So then the next thing that happened was the RCMP said, well, we're trying to talk to her, but we can't find her. And she had split and they couldn't find her. And so my brother, he was in the morgue at a hospital. I believe it was in Kamloops, British Columbia. And they needed his body removed from there. It had been there, for 3 weeks at least, maybe longer. And so they said, well, that we could make the arrangements for him. So that was the only thing that we were allowed to do, was to, deal with that part of things. And and then it was just silence.
Aside from Petra's suspicion that Peter's ex-girlfriend could have been involved, there's reason to believe that police did consider her a person of interest and still cooperated with her more than Petra and her family.
As many of our Canadian listeners might know, the media reports very little about crimes to the public, the reason being that they try to hold back information that might implicate a suspect further down the road. Looking at the news reports about Peter from 2006, very little was said about his case. They mentioned that he was found dead in a ditch, but there was absolutely no mention of his cause of death or weapons. As the years passed, it seemed to Petra that there was no movement on Peter's case whatsoever. But in 2009, there was a break. We've already mentioned that the accused had not been keeping what he had done a secret by any means. He told quite a few people in their friend circle about the murder, and one of them, an ex-girlfriend of his, came forward to the police.
In between the time that this accused murdered my brother and made his confession, he was actually assaulted about a year and a half after being involved in my brother's murder. And it was a very severe assault, and it left him very injured. And he ended up in a coma, I believe, for about 4 months. And it would have been a medically induced coma. And then he came out of that coma, and then he found that, he was disabled. And so they sent him to sort of a brain injury rehabilitation place in Alberta. And so while he was there, he was communicating with an ex-girlfriend of his who he was still good friends with. And it was during those conversations that he told her that he had been involved in my brother's murder. He said to her, "Do you remember Peter?" And she goes, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, that he was involved in the murder." And so she, I think that she sort of knew that he had been, because they had all been questioned by the RCMP before. And one thing that he had told her was that, "Oh, they'll never find out what happened." This is what he had said to her, which kind of made her think, okay, why do you think that? What information do you have, to make a statement like that? And so then when he said that to her, I don't think she was totally surprised that, he finally confessed. But she thought about it for a while, because she's still friends with his family. She's friends with him. And she thought about it. And then he's got these injuries and, this and that. So she thought about it for a while before she went to the RCMP. And then she decided that that was just the right thing to do. So she did. And then the RCMP asked her if she would be willing to participate in a wiretap to see if he would tell her more about it or confess again. And she said, yes, she would. And so then they set that up. I believe it was, she told them originally in April, and then the wiretap was done in May of 2006. And so they had to purchase phones and computers and everything that were just brand new, and they did all of that. They really did try to do the best that they could to get this confession out of him. And so I believe it was done in a hotel room somewhere, and she went there, and then they started it basically like over the phone. And so she phoned there to the rehabilitation place that he was in, and she phoned there and asked to speak to him, and he got on the phone line with her. And the RCMP knew that because it was basically his physical disability had something to do with the brain, that they had to test to make sure that his memory and everything was okay, that he could remember things from his past life with her and everything. So the wiretap was actually quite long, but they got her to talk to him about, their life and things that had happened. And his memory was perfect. And she did tell the RCMP afterwards that he had no memory issues at all. He remembered everything 100%. So they knew that this was going well. So then they actually kind of encouraged her to say a few things that she doesn't necessarily believe herself, in order to get him to feel comfortable enough, to confess to her again why he was involved in murdering my brother, and what he thought his good enough reason was for being involved, you see. So she did that, and he again did say that he was involved. So they got that on wiretap. And he also implicated the other people involved in it, and also said that it was planned, that it had been planned. And then so they had that. The RCMP had that, and then it was in October of 2006 when they finally, arrested and charged him, because they had gone to a Crown Counsel and gotten approval for the first-degree murder charge against him. It took a while, and I knew nothing about any of this. I was totally in the dark. I knew nothing. I didn't know her or about her or that she existed or anything. Until he was arrested. And then they called me and said that they had arrested him and that they had 100% slam dunk case, and that this was, going to be successful. And I was happy.
The confession from the accused was incredibly detailed. He knew what type of gun was used, that Peter had been beaten, and that his neck had been cut. He also provided the motive for the attack, repeating that Peter had raped the ex-girlfriend's daughter. He implicated the ex-girlfriend and the second suspect, referring to the other suspect as a hitman. We know that the media had not released any information about the attack, so the only way the accused would have known this amount of detail about the murder is if he or someone he knew had done it. And yes, the information he provided did match the details of Peter's death.
We don't know what evidence the RCMP had collected from the crime scene, but between the comments they made to Petra and a new witness that has come forward with some pretty damning information, it sounded like the case was a slam dunk. Except it wasn't. The trial was delayed for years, and when it did finally happen, it only lasted 5 days, with a handful of witnesses being called and very little evidence being presented.
So then the trial started, and it only lasted 5 days. There was some days in between where there was nothing. We had the day free to do whatever we wanted to do. Because sometimes, like the coroner, he couldn't show up, to testify earlier. And so then he was delayed, for the following week. But basically, it was only 5 days. And some of that was just like half days, so there weren't very many witnesses called. The Crown prosecutor only called 2 civilian witnesses, and then I believe 2 RCMP. One was the undercover, whose name has to remain confidential. And so 2 officers, the coroner, and then the defense lawyer. He brought 3 witnesses, although the accused never testified in court. So it was very short, very short, and not much was being asked, like questions were being asked or really anything. I was just not very impressed. For a murder case, it was just too minimal and too short.
We spoke with a senior legal analyst for the provincial and Supreme Courts in BC, and she agreed with Petra. She said murder trials generally call 20 to 40 witnesses. Petra talked to the witness, who the accused had confessed to after the trial, and she was shocked that the prosecution hadn't even helped prepare her for her testimony.
My husband and I, we have testified at trials before, and we knew the process about how the Crown prosecutor would talk to us and get our details, like the evidence that we gave to the police, and go through it and to, tell us what to expect at trial and things like that. And we found out from the main witness that he never talked to her at all before the trial, and only handed her the wiretap, and that's it. Didn't talk about, what she knew or tell her what to expect at trial, or really nothing at all. So I was kind of shocked by that. I thought that wasn't right. I mean, she was on the younger side too, a young person, and they kind of need a little more guidance, because it's very nerve-wracking going to court to testify against, a murderer, a suspected murderer. So yeah, I just couldn't believe that at all.
We don't know what happened to the evidence alluded to by the RCMP and the new witness, but it didn't see its way into court. The trial was a judge-only trial, meaning there was no jury. Peter did point out that the Crown prosecutor generally worked as a defense attorney, and he had told her he didn't like an eye for an eye approach. That seems like kind of an unusual thing to say to a grieving family of a murder victim, considering Petra wasn't seeking the death penalty, which doesn't even exist in Canada, but rather the appropriate punishment set out by the criminal justice system aimed to protect its citizens. In a surprising turn of events from what Petra had been told by the RCMP, the judge acquitted the accused. His reasoning was that he believed the accused had suffered memory loss from his attack, and he believed that his confession to his ex was just flirting and bragging, because most women are very impressed by murder confessions.
Of course.
Yeah. It is definitely possible that his memory was affected by the attack, but that doesn't account for the fact that he had confessed to the other witness before his attack, or that the details in which he confessed to actually lined up with Peter's injuries.
Another blow to Petra's quest for justice was that a publication ban was actually placed on the accused's name, which is the reason we're not using his name, even though he did go to trial. For our listeners outside of Canada, this might be a new concept for you. Here's the definition of a publication ban from the Department of Justice's website. A publication ban is an order the court makes that prevents anyone from publishing, broadcasting, or sending any information that could identify a victim, witness, or other person who participates in the criminal justice system. The publication ban is intended to allow victims, witnesses, and others to participate in the justice system without suffering negative consequences. We spoke with the senior legal analyst in BC about the publication ban to try and get a better understanding of why they're used. She also mentioned that these bans are generally put into place to protect victims and witnesses. She said that it's pretty rare that this ban would be used to protect an acquitted person unless they are not an adult or if they're an informant for another case, and the accused was an adult at the time of the murder. We aren't quite sure why a prosecutor, out of all people, would request this for someone who was accused of murder. But this hurdle is really making it even harder for Petra to get answers as to what really happened.
The accused and the second suspect have both been involved in other crimes before Peter's murder and afterwards as well.
So the accused, he had been in trouble with the court for a long time, since he was young. And he was actually on probation from youth court at the time he was involved in my brother's murder. I thought for sure that, they would want to convict him based on his history, but I guess they didn't want to do that. The other person involved in the murder, the other suspect, well, there's 3 suspects, but the other one who I knew was like physically there at the time. They might have all 3 been, but I don't know. So he has murdered someone else since he was involved in my brother's murder. And he is currently in prison, but I understand that he will probably get out pretty soon. He was involved in that murder in 2013. And it took a long time to get to trial, but in 2018, he was convicted of manslaughter. And because he had already served time in remand, in Canada, they get like double time, sometimes even triple time. And so he was found guilty of the manslaughter and also dismemberment of the person who he killed. And so he got 11 and a half years. But because of the time he spent in remand, it got cut down to about 6, I think, or 5.5 is what was remaining for him to spend in prison. And then in Canada too, they only serve about 2/3 of that time in prison. So if it was 2018 and now it's 2021, he's going to be getting pretty close to the time that he gets out. It was sort of horrific too, because he put the body down someone else's well. And I was horrified when I heard that, because I thought, well, what if the people were drinking that water? But apparently, yeah. But apparently there were 2 wells on the property, and that one was not, it was disabled. It was not being used. So I didn't hear that until that trial.
Let's hear more about how the second suspect's murder trial went compared to Peter's.
Because I went to that trial, what I wanted to see was what was the difference between the trial, for my brother's murder, and this trial where he was involved in another murder, to see the difference between the two. And it was a world of difference. They called 60 witnesses. It was just a world of difference. And it made me really believe that there was something wrong with the trial that was held against the accused. And it even made me feel even more that something just was not right with how it was conducted.
And this is where things currently stand for Petra and her search for answers. We do know that more witnesses have continued to come forward throughout the years, and we know that the RCMP will not move forward without new information.
Most of all, what they would really like is if anyone involved in the murder now feels bad about it, if they would just come forward and confess. They pretty much know that the one guy that is in prison right now, he's never ever gonna confess. But possibly the other 2, because maybe they just feel bad now, about having done this, having found out that my brother didn't do what he was accused of doing, and that he was innocent, of that. And now that it's 15 years later, maybe they're thinking, oh, gee, maybe I should just tell the truth. Especially now that the one guy is in prison. Apparently, from what I understand, is that a lot of people were afraid of him. And so now that he's in prison, it's a perfect time actually to come forward, because otherwise, if you come forward and they don't make arrests, and then he knows that you've come forward, it kind of puts you in a bad situation. But right now is perfect. And yeah, basically when it comes down to it, there's nothing wrong with trying to help someone else or help another family, because this has been horrific for my family. This is ongoing 15 years, and everything that's happened, it's just we just get beaten down more and more and more, and there's just nothing wrong with coming clean and trying to help somebody else. And even if they don't end up going to prison for it, I would like to know the truth. And even the accused that was acquitted, even at this point, if he feels that he should come forward and tell the truth, then he should do that, because he can't be tried again. Like in Canada, once you are acquitted, you cannot be tried. Yeah, double jeopardy. Like, say if he was afraid of the other person involved in the murder, the guy that's in prison now, if that kind of makes sense, but because he is in prison, it doesn't make sense not to, because he could come out of prison and cause more trouble for all of them. Do you know what I mean? Because he knows that there's still people out there that know, and he could come after them.
If you or someone you know has information about Peter's murder, and maybe you were afraid of the guy that did it, this really is the time to do the right thing. He's in prison. Your testimony could help keep him there longer, and it could help Petra and her family put this to rest. No one should have to have their loved one taken from them in such a violent way, but she really does just want to know the truth at this point. If you have information, we urge you to come forward, even anonymously, and contact the RCMP. We have the contact information for the sergeant in charge, and we will include that in our show notes. Wow. I watched an unusual true crime documentary this week. It's called House of Secrets, The Barari Deaths. Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't.
I think it's new on Netflix. So it's really quite the mystery. Like, I guess without any spoilers, the plot is that a large family in India, in a busy neighborhood, like not way out in the boonies or anything, was found. All of them were found dead, hanging in their home. And this was like 11 people, including like kids and old people and everything. And it was just a weird happening. And like the investigators checking it out were trying to determine, like, was this suicide? Was this murder? What was the situation exactly? And it seems to have maybe been something more bizarre than either of those options. So it's definitely worth a watch. It's a little slow, the first episode, but once they start getting into what really happened, what the fuck?
Yeah.
That's all.
And I actually have heard of this. I just added it to my to-watch list yesterday, and it sounds really fascinating. So I will definitely watch that this week for sure.
Yeah. I also finished 9 Perfect Strangers. Did you finish that already?
I did finish
probably
it.
long ago. Yeah. It got super weird. It's like, it sucks that we get the chance to like introduce, a new show that we're watching and mention that, and then we never get to follow up on it because like, with the podcast episodes, we want to tread lightly and not, release any heavy spoilers when people haven't seen things yet. But like, I kind of feel like for 9 Perfect Strangers, maybe we could read the book for our book club. So we really get the chance to discuss the story with all of these monsters. Because I don't know, like I feel like also maybe we could even create some posts, or like we're working on a little revamp to our website. Maybe we could incorporate some sort of like spoiler-friendly message board threads or something like that. So we can discuss shows after we mention them the first time and like really discuss, the weird things about it or where we're at or what our theories are along the way.
Yeah, I love that idea because I really love the show. I thought it was very beautiful, and I definitely wanted to talk to people about it, and no one else I knew had finished it. So I just had to deal with those emotions on my own.
And what a roller coaster. It was all over the place. Yeah. Even till the last episode, I was like, wait a minute, what is happening? And so, just really not what I expected at all. But I still would join Nicole Kidman's cult, I've got to say, no matter what happened there. I'm in. Yeah.
I'm still in.
Did you see anything else cool this week?
The only thing I watched, which I did post about on TikTok, was we talked about last week's Squid Games, and I did start it. I think I'm on episode 3. It's very good. I definitely recommend watching it. Like, if you are sensitive about gore, then big trigger warning. Like, the plot of it is that people that are heavily in debt are invited by, we're assuming, like some very wealthy person or somebody just awful, to compete in children's games like red light, green light, for a chance to win like just an unfathomable amount of money to pay off their debt. And they sign this contract, and it's like, if you lose a round, you'll be eliminated, which actually means getting shot in the head. Like, it's really graphic. It's very gory. It's kind of like done in sort of like a very like cartoonish way. Like the way that they present. Yeah, I think you would really like this show. It's definitely like a bit much for me because I'm not a big violence person, but I really like its anti-capitalism message. So I'm pushing through. It's very engaging. It's really good.
Yeah, that's cool. I know you mentioned on our TikTok about this that it was sort of like Battle Royale and like the Hunger Games.
Yeah,
which
sort of thing.
Both were good, like the stories were really good, but it could have been improved upon by, just incorporating the dangers of capitalism and like how out of control that can get. So I really like that is a plot point here. That's very cool.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's really good. Highly recommend.
Well, I guess that's enough murder for 1 week. But if you disagree and you would actually prefer a little more murder, you can always find us on murdermurder.news for the latest breaking true crime news articles every day of the week.
You can find us on Instagram at Murder Murder News, where this week we posted a meme that takes one last dig at Ted Cruz as a Zodiac killer, and I accidentally used hashtag Ted Cruz on that one, which got us like 30 comments about how much they love
Some
Ted Cruz.
anti-fans.
I was like, this is not the place for you. Oops. You can also find us on Twitter at Murder News and on TikTok at Murder Murder News, where this week we posted about a moment from true crime history back in 2012 where Qui Chu Chadwick was murdered by, you guessed it, her husband. Really interesting story, so check that out. And on Facebook, if you search for Murder Murder News, you'll find our official page, which you can follow for all of our updates.
And if you search Murder Murder News, you'll also find our Facebook group, which you'll want to join to stay in the loop about the latest book club selections and upcoming events. We're actually just finalizing the details of our upcoming virtual Halloween party, so if you're a member of our Facebook group, you'll see a post about that probably by the time this episode is live.
And if you're enjoying the show, we really encourage you to leave us a 5-star review. It really helps us get promoted on Apple Podcasts. So that would be amazing. And if you're not enjoying the show, please leave a 1-star review at our podcast, Sword and Scale.
Oh, yeah. I love that. And 100% agree. That guy sucks. So thanks again for joining us. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Friday.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.